The shadow that stretches over Middle-earth is older than the age of men and elves, deeper than the vast forests and towering mountains that define its landscape. It is a shadow not merely of darkness, but of an ancient conflict that ripples through the very fabric of the world, between light and shadow, order and chaos, hope and despair. To understand why Gandalf feared the Witch-King of Angmar more than Sauron, we must first step back and grasp the layered nature of evil in this world, the overt and the hidden, the powerful and the subtle, the mortal and the immortal. Sauron stands as the Dark Lord, the obvious face of malevolence, wielding vast armies and ancient sorcery to claim dominion over Middle-earth. Yet, lurking beneath his shadow is a more nuanced, haunting presence. The Witch-King, the Lord of the Nazgul, whose dread is both physical and spiritual. Unlike Sauron, whose might is grand and visible, the Witch-King embodies a more insidious terror, born of a fate worse than death, and a curse that twists his very essence. This layered threat unsettled Gandalf deeply. The forces of shadow are not merely armies and dark sorcery. They are woven into the destiny of Middle-earth, into the fall and rise of kingdoms, into the fragile balance between light and dark. Early whispers of the Nazgul, the cursed kings who fell to rings of power, hint at the mechanisms that transform fate and bind souls. The ancient realm of Angmar, the Witch-King's domain, stands as a grim monument to the insidious reach of this shadow. Before we can fully comprehend the Witch-King's unique menace, we must ask, what made this one servant's shadow so terrifying to Gandalf, a Maya and guide to the free peoples? This question opens the path to our next chapter, where we trace the Witch-King's rise and the corruption that birthed his undying curse. Before we explore the Witch-King's curse and power, we must first understand his origins. This chapter traces the journey of a once mortal king whose ambition and pride led him into darkness, ultimately binding him to Sauron's will as the dreaded lord of the Nazgul. The story begins in the distant past, during the Second Age, when the Rings of Power were forged by Celebrimbor and his smiths in Eregion. Among these were 9 rings, given to mortal men, kings, lords, and warriors whose hearts were vulnerable to pride, greed, or desire for power. These 9 rings were crafted as gifts, but became instruments of corruption. They offered extended life, influence, and might beyond measure. Yet they enslaved their bearers' wills to the one ring, forged by Sauron in secret. The bearers of these 9 rings became the Nazgul, ring-wraiths, forever bound between life and death, shadows of their former selves. The Witch-King was the greatest among them. Once a proud and powerful human king, his name lost to time. He was the most favored of Sauron's servants. His transformation was not sudden, but gradual, a slow surrender to the creeping dominion of the One Ring. As his mortal body faded, his spirit became wreathed in darkness, cloaked in black robes that gave him an eerie, deathless presence. Though no longer alive in the usual sense, he could still walk the world, a spectral terror, wielding fear as his weapon. This transformation was both a gift and a curse. The power to linger beyond death gave him terrible endurance and resilience. Yet, it also severed him from life's warmth and hope, binding him to Sauron's will with chains unseen but unbreakable. His identity was erased, replaced by a symbol of dread and despair. With his new form, the Witch-King became the Lord of the Nazgul, Sauron's chief lieutenant and enforcer. His purpose was singular, to hunt the One Ring, crush resistance, and spread terror across Middle-earth. To that end, he founded the realm of Angmar in the north, a fortress of shadow and malice designed to weaken the northern kingdoms of Arnor. Angmar was not merely a political power, but a dark statement of intent. It was a place where fear and death took shape, where the Witch-King's curse twisted the land and corrupted the hearts of men. The northern realms suffered from relentless raids and sieges, with the Witch-King's forces undermining alliances and fostering paranoia. This strategic weakening of Arnor was a calculated move, designed to break the resistance to Sauron's return. Yet, the Witch-King's rise was not just a tale of armies and conquest. It was also a story of fate and cosmic balance. The rings of power had shattered the natural order by offering mortal men an unnatural longevity and power at the cost of their souls. This mechanism, gift turned curse, underpinned the tragedy of the Nazgul and set the stage for the unique threat posed by the Witch-King. He was neither fully alive nor truly dead, suspended in a liminal state that warped both his being and the world around him. This eerie existence granted him an otherworldly presence that instilled dread not only in mortal hearts, but in beings of greater power. His shadow loomed over the political map of Middle-earth, stretching beyond the physical realm into the spiritual and mystical. The breadcrumbs planted here, Angmar's fortress, the ring's corrupting power, the liminal nature of the Nazgul, will deepen as we explore the Witch-King's curse and its metaphysical implications in the next chapter. How does this cursed existence disturb the natural order? What does it mean to be caught between life and death? And how does this make the Witch-King a uniquely terrifying figure, even to Gandalf? These are the questions we will seek to answer next. In the last chapter, we saw how the Witch-King rose from a mortal king to a spectral servant, bound forever by the corrupting power of the rings. Now, we delve deeper into the nature of his curse, a state that transcends death and unsettles the very order of Middle-earth. The Witch-King's existence is unlike any other. He is neither alive in the natural sense, nor truly dead. Rather, he inhabits a liminal space, caught between life and oblivion. This condition is a dark gift and a terrible burden. It grants him a form of immortality, but at the cost of losing his humanity, his soul's light extinguished beneath layers of shadow. This deathless state means the Witch-King cannot rest or find peace. His presence is a constant reminder of the unnatural forces at play, of the deep imbalance that the rings of power wrought upon the world. His very being is an affront to the cycle of life and death that sustains Middle-earth's order. Mechanically, this curse grants him powers that defy the mortal realm. He can move unseen, command terror, and strike fear into the hearts of men and even creatures of great power. His voice echoes with a spectral chill. His touch drains hope. These mechanisms of fear and despair act as weapons, weakening resistance before blades are drawn. But the cost of this power is profound. By severing himself from death, the Witch-King becomes a creature of relentless anguish, trapped in eternal servitude to Sauron's will. The longer he exists, the more his identity dissolves into a shadowy embodiment of dread, losing all traces of his former self. This blurring of life and death also disturbs the spiritual fabric of Middle-earth. The Witch-King's curse ripples through the souls of those he confronts, threatening not only their bodies but their spirits. His presence marks places and people with a lingering despair that can outlast any battle. The black robes and the iron crown he wears are not mere symbols, but vessels of this curse, binding his essence and amplifying his terror. They are emblems of his lost humanity and his eternal role as harbinger of doom. For Gandalf, who himself is a Maya, a spirit bound to a physical form with a sacred mission, this state poses a unique threat. The Witch-King's unnatural existence defies the usual laws governing life, death, and spiritual balance. To confront such a being is to face a violation of the natural order, a challenge that resonates deeply within Gandalf's wisdom and fears. This chapter's breadcrumbs, the liminal deathless state, the mechanisms of fear and despair, and the spiritual disturbance set the stage for understanding Gandalf's mandate and the constraints under which he operates. How does Gandalf's divine mission shape his dread of this dark servant? What cosmic laws govern their conflict? These questions guide us to the next chapter, where we explore Gandalf's origin, his role as a Maya, and the mandates that govern his interventions in Middle-earth. We have traced the Witch-King's cursed existence, a shadow caught between life and death, wielding fear as a weapon that unsettles the natural order of Middle-earth. Now, we turn to Gandalf, himself a Maya spirit sent to guide and aid, and explore the nature of his role, his mandate, and how these shape his fear of the Witch-King. Gandalf was not born in Middle-earth, but in the timeless realms beyond, as one of the Maiar, immortal spirits who serve the Valar, the powerful beings who shape the world. When darkness began to rise anew, the Valar sent Gandalf, along with 4 others, to Middle-earth as the Astari, or wizards. Their mission was subtle, to counsel, to encourage hope and resistance, but not to dominate or coerce. This mandate binds Gandalf with cosmic laws and political prudence. Though his powers exceed those of mortal men, he must respect the free will of Middle-earth's inhabitants. His intervention is measured, careful, and often restrained. This self-imposed limitation, dictated by a higher order, defines much of his journey. In the face of Sauron's growing shadow, Gandalf must weigh the cost of action and inaction. His wisdom grows from ages of observation and empathy, but also from the burden of responsibility. He understands that some powers, even his own, must be wielded with humility to avoid the very corruption he seeks to prevent. Within this framework, Gandalf's fear of the Witch-King takes on a deeper meaning. The Witch-King's unnatural state, neither alive nor dead, challenges not only the physical world, but the spiritual laws that govern existence. As a Maya, bound by sacred rules, Gandalf senses that this servant of Sauron wields a power that could unravel balances Gandalf is sworn to uphold. This fear is not born of weakness, but of profound respect for the cosmic stakes. The Witch-King embodies a violation of fate and natural order, a relentless force that could undermine hope and freedom. Gandalf's dread is thus an acknowledgement of the Witch-King's unique threat, one that cannot be easily countered without risking greater harm. The chapter's breadcrumbs include the Astari's origins, Gandalf's limits, and the delicate balance between intervention and restraint. These elements set up the exploration of the Witch-King's political and military campaign in the north, which follows in the next chapter. How does the Witch-King's rise disrupt the fragile political alliances of Middle-earth? What consequences arise from his campaign of terror, and how do these shape Gandalf's fears and strategies? These questions lead us onward to examine the political chessboard of Angmar and the Northern Realms. In the previous chapter, we understood Gandalf's divine origin and the delicate balance that governs his mission. Now, we turn our gaze northward to the realm of Angmar, the Witch-King's stronghold, and the political turmoil his rise unleashed among the kingdoms of men. Angmar was more than a fortress. It was the dark heart of a calculated strategy aimed at breaking the northern kingdoms of Arnor. After the realm of Arnor had fragmented into smaller successor states, Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rudor, these divided realms grew vulnerable to internal strife and external threats. The Witch-King seized upon this weakness. Through relentless raids, sieges, and psychological warfare, Angmar sowed distrust and fear among these northern peoples. His forces did not merely attack armies, but sought to unravel the fragile bonds of alliance, turning neighbor against neighbor. This fragmentation was no accident. It was a deliberate effort to cripple resistance and clear the way for Sauron's eventual return. The mechanisms at work here extend beyond mere military might. The Witch-King's presence inspired terror that fed on existing divisions, exploiting old rivalries and ambitions. His campaign was as much about breaking wills as breaking walls. This strategy introduced a new kind of warfare, one that wielded despair as a weapon to corrode the foundations of human polity. The cost was devastating. The northern kingdoms, once proud and united, fell into ruin and disarray. The political aftermath weakened not only men's realms, but also the broader alliance that Gandalf hoped to foster against the coming darkness. Angmar's campaign effectively bought time and space for Sauron's resurgence in the south. For Gandalf, this unraveling of political order was deeply troubling. His fear of the Witch-King was sharpened not just by the spectral terror he embodied, but by the very real consequences of his campaigns. The collapse of northern unity threatened the entire balance of power and underscored the cost of the Witch-King's shadow. Among the breadcrumbs here are the fractured realms of Arnor, the strategic importance of Angmar, and the psychological warfare that extended beyond the battlefield. These threads prepare us to explore the Witch-King's mastery of fear itself, a weapon he wields with deadly precision, in the next chapter. How does the Witch-King use fear to dominate and dismantle not just armies, but the hearts and minds of Middle-earth's inhabitants? What toll does this psychological warfare take on hope and courage? These questions guide us into the chilling exploration of fear as power. Having surveyed the political devastation wrought by the Witch-King in the north, we now turn inward to the very heart of his terror, the mastery of fear itself. This chapter examines how the Witch-King wields fear not only as a tactic but as a profound metaphysical weapon that reaches beyond flesh and bone to unsettle the spirit. Fear in Middle-earth is not merely a fleeting emotion. It is a force with real weight and consequence. The Witch-King's presence distorts reality, casting a pall over the lands he invades, and draining hope from even the bravest hearts. His very visage, hidden beneath shadowed robes and crowned with iron, evokes an instinctive dread that echoes through minds and souls alike. This mechanism of fear works in layered ways. At the most immediate level, it shatters morale, weakening armies before battle is joined. Leaders falter, alliances strain, and despair seeps into the minds of the oppressed. But the Witch-King's terror is not limited to the battlefield. It seeps into dreams, corrupts counsel, and breeds suspicion among allies. Moreover, this terror has a metaphysical dimension. The Witch-King's cursed existence imbues his fear with an unnatural potency that resonates with the deeper currents of fate and spirit in Middle-earth. His touch is said to sap the will to resist, his voice to chill the soul, and his very proximity to spread despair that lingers long after he has passed. Gandalf, as a Maya and guide, is not immune to this threat. His role requires him to nurture hope and resilience, yet he knows too well how the Witch-King's power can erode these precious qualities. This dynamic heightens Gandalf's dread, for the Witch-King's terror is not only a weapon against bodies, but a siege upon spirit and will. The costs of this psychological warfare are profound. Fear corrodes communities from within, fracturing trust and weakening the alliances vital to resist shadow. The Witch-King's mastery of terror thus becomes a force multiplier, magnifying his physical strength with intangible but lethal influence. Breadcrumbs sown here, fear's layered effects, its spiritual potency, and Gandalf's personal struggle. Prepare us to examine Gandalf's own limits in the next chapter. How does his power measure against the Witch-King's terror? What binds Gandalf's hand, even as he confronts such darkness? These questions lead naturally to the exploration of Gandalf's constraints, the balance between power and mandate that defines his mission and deepens his fear. Previously, we explored the Witch-King's terrifying mastery of fear, a weapon that unsettles both body and spirit. Now, we turn to Gandalf's power, and, importantly, the limits that govern it. Though a Maya, with immense innate strength, Gandalf's abilities are shaped and restrained by cosmic laws and mandates, which deepen his dread of the Witch-King. Gandalf's power is not boundless. Though he is a spirit of great wisdom and light, sent to aid Middle-earth, his role is circumscribed by the will of the Valar, the godlike powers who govern the world's order. His mission is to counsel and inspire, not to dominate or directly challenge evil with overwhelming force. This self-imposed restraint arises from respect for free will and the delicate balance between intervention and autonomy. These limits are crucial. Unchecked power risks corruption or tyranny, the very evils Gandalf strives against. Instead, his strength lies in wisdom, subtlety, and encouragement. He acts as a guide, a catalyst for hope rather than a conqueror. This framework governs his every choice, especially in confronting foes like the Witch-King. The Witch-King, by contrast, operates with fewer constraints. His deathless curse and position as Sauron's chief lieutenant grant him relentless endurance and cruelty, free from such cosmic checks. This asymmetry heightens Gandalf's apprehension, as he cannot simply overpower a foe who defies natural laws. Furthermore, crossing these limits carries cost, both personal and cosmic. Gandalf's use of power risks upsetting the world's balance and undermining his mission's legitimacy. His fear is partly born of knowing when force might provoke greater ruin. This chapter seeds breadcrumbs around Gandalf's mandate, the fragile equilibrium between power and restraint, and the consequences of overreach. These elements prepare us to recount a crucial historical moment, the siege of Minas Tirith, where Gandalf and the Witch-King come into direct confrontation. How do these constraints manifest when shadow assaults the last bastions of hope? What price does Gandalf pay in standing against a foe unbound by such limits? These questions guide us to the next chapter's exploration of their climactic encounter. In the previous chapter, we explored Gandalf's constrained power and the delicate balance he must maintain in his mission. Now, we turn to one of the defining moments when the Witch-King's shadow threatened to engulf the last stronghold of men, the siege of Minas Tirith. Here, the collision of physical might and metaphysical terror crystallizes. Minas Tirith, the White City, stood as the final bulwark against Sauron's return. Its walls bore centuries of history, hope, and unyielding defiance. But as the forces of Mordor amassed, led by the Witch-King himself, the city's fate hung in precarious balance. The siege was not only a military campaign, but a spiritual trial, a test of courage, faith, and resilience against overwhelming darkness. The Witch-King's arrival brought with it an aura of dread that swept through the city like a chilling wind. His very presence struck fear into the hearts of soldiers and civilians alike, fracturing morale before the first assault. His mechanisms of terror played out vividly. Commanders wavered, whispers of doom spread, and the shadow of despair crept along the battlements. Gandalf stood as the beacon of hope amid this gathering storm. His calm presence countered the creeping fear, rallying the defenders and inspiring resilience. Yet, even he understood the unique peril posed by the Witch-King, a foe who existed beyond death, wielded terror as a weapon, and challenged the natural order Gandalf sought to preserve. This confrontation was not merely physical, but symbolic. The Witch-King's siege threatened to break the last alliance of free peoples and extinguish hope itself. Gandalf's dread was born from knowing that failure here would unravel the fragile balance of Middle-earth's fate. Amid the siege, the prophecy surrounding the Witch-King's demise lingered, a cryptic declaration that no man could kill him. This enigmatic phrase added layers of uncertainty and urgency to the defenders' efforts, underscoring the limits of mortal might and the complex weave of fate. As siege engines thundered and the walls trembled, the spiritual battle unfolded in parallel, fear confronting hope, despair challenging resolve. Gandalf's role was to hold the line, not only with sword and staff, but with unwavering will and vision. Breadcrumbs planted here include the prophecy's cryptic wording, the nature of the siege as both physical and spiritual contest, and the fragile hope that hangs by a thread. These threads will lead us into a deeper examination of the prophecy itself in the next chapter. What is the true meaning behind the prophecy of the Witch-King's fall? How does fate and interpretation shape the final confrontation? These questions open the door to the mysteries we explore next. We left the siege of Minas Tirith with a lingering enigma, the prophecy that the Witch-King would not fall by the hand of man. This cryptic declaration shaped the final confrontation's tension, leaving both defenders and listeners pondering its true meaning. In this chapter, we explore the layers of prophecy, fate, and interpretation that surround the Witch-King's demise. Prophecy in Middle-earth is a delicate and often double-edged force. It is neither absolute fate nor mere chance, but an intertwining of will, choice, and circumstance. The words spoken long ago about the Witch-King's fall were crafted to instill both hope and caution, hinting at an outcome veiled in ambiguity. The phrase, "no man can kill him," seems straightforward, yet conceals nuance. It signals that the Witch-King's end would come at the hands of one who does not fit the traditional definition of man. This ambiguity opened the path for the unlikely heroes who ultimately faced him. Enter Éowyn, shield maiden of Rohan, and Merry, a hobbit of the Shire, figures who embody unexpected courage and the subversion of prophecy's apparent limits. Éowyn, as a woman, is not man in the literal sense, and Merry's small stature and humble origin confound expectations. Together, they reveal how prophecy's power lies as much in interpretation as in words. This mechanism of fate intertwines with the concept of free will. The prophecy does not dictate outcomes, but frames possibilities. It invites those who hear it to look beyond surface meanings and discover deeper truths, to act with courage even when odds seem insurmountable. For Gandalf, this prophecy is a source of reflection and concern. It underscores the unpredictability of fate and the limits of even his foresight. The Witch-King's fall is not a simple victory, but a moment charged with consequence and cost. Breadcrumbs here include the nuanced nature of prophecy, the roles of Éowyn and Merry, and the interplay of fate and free will. These threads set the stage for the next chapter's exploration of the Witch-King's actual fall, the success and sacrifice entwined in that pivotal event. How does the prophecy shape the final battle's outcome? What hidden costs lie beneath the surface of apparent victory? These questions carry us forward. Previously, we examined the prophecy that no man could kill the Witch-King, setting the stage for an ending steeped in mystery and layered meaning. Now, we reach the pivotal moment where prophecy, courage, and fate converge in the Witch-King's fall, a victory steeped in sacrifice and shadowed by cost. The battle atop the walls of Minas Tirith unfolds with a desperation that mirrors the stakes for all of Middle-earth. The Witch-King, wielding dark sorcery and unrelenting terror, breaches the city's defenses, threatening to crush the last hope of men. His presence alone turns the tide of battle toward despair, as warriors falter and fear spreads. Yet, in this darkest hour, Éowyn steps forward, cloaked not only in armor, but in resolve that defies prophecy's apparent doom. Alongside her rides Merry, whose unexpected bravery and knowledge of ancient lore, acquired in the quiet corners of the Shire and the battlefields of the past, become decisive. Together, they confront the Witch-King. Éowyn's declaration, "I am no man," fulfills the prophecy's hidden meaning, while Merry's strike weakens the spectral lord, piercing the shadow that binds him. This moment of triumph is profound, yet it is not unblemished. The Witch-King's death signals a rupture in the cosmic order, a shattering of the unnatural curse, but also releases lingering darkness. The cost of this victory weighs heavily. Éowyn is gravely wounded, her fate uncertain, and Merry bears the scars of his confrontation. The price of standing against such overwhelming evil is steep, underscoring the personal toll beneath the glory of victory. For Gandalf and the Free Peoples, the Witch-King's fall is a turning point, yet not the end. The shadow persists in other forms, the struggle continues, and the fragile hope kindled here must be nurtured with care. This chapter's breadcrumbs, the intertwined fate of prophecy and free will, the cost of victory, and the lingering shadow, prepare us to reflect on why Gandalf feared this foe more deeply than even Sauron. The Witch-King's unique blend of curse, terror, and resilience cast a shadow that challenged not only Middle-earth's armies, but its spiritual foundations. What does this battle teach us about fear, power, and the cost of resisting darkness? How does Gandalf's fear illuminate deeper truths about the nature of evil and hope? These reflections await us in the next chapter. Following the Witch-King's fall, the landscape of Middle-earth shifted in both visible and subtle ways. Yet, victory did not erase the shadows born of centuries of darkness. Instead, the aftermath revealed the deep legacy of ruin and the enduring costs carried by those who stood against evil. The destruction of Angmar and the end of the Witch-King's reign marked the collapse of a great threat. But the scars on the northern realms ran deep. The once fractured kingdoms of Arnor lay in ruins, their people displaced or lost, and their lands marked by lingering fear and desolation. The political and cultural upheaval would take generations to heal. This ruin was not merely physical, it was spiritual and psychological. The terror instilled by the Witch-King had fractured trust, sowed suspicion, and corroded the bonds between men. Even after his fall, echoes of that fear haunted hearts and minds, reminding all that shadow can endure beyond the death of a single foe. Gandalf's reflection on these outcomes deepened his understanding of evil's nature. The Witch-King's legacy was a testament to the high price of corruption and the fragile resilience of hope. It underscored that even in victory, consequences ripple outward, often unseen but profound. The survivors bore the burden of rebuilding, not just cities and kingdoms, but also fractured alliances and shattered spirits. Their endurance became a quiet testament to the costs of war and the quiet strength needed to reclaim light from darkness. Among these themes is the enduring question of legacy. What does it mean to confront darkness, and what traces do we leave behind? The Witch-King's ruin reminds us that victories against shadow require vigilance and humility, for evil can resurge in new forms. This chapter's breadcrumbs, the ruin of Arnor, the psychological aftermath, and Gandalf's mature reflection set the stage for our concluding chapter, where we return to the opening thesis with a deepened perspective. How does the legacy of the Witch-King's terror inform our understanding of fear and hope? What lessons does Gandalf's fear teach us about resisting darkness without losing oneself? These final reflections draw our journey to a close. We now arrive at Gandalf's personal reflection on the journey we have traced, a meditation on fear, power, and wisdom born through confronting the Witch-King. His dread of this shadowy figure reveals not weakness, but profound insight into the nature of evil and the delicate balance required to resist it. Gandalf's fear is measured, rooted in an understanding that the Witch-King's power challenges the very foundations of the natural and spiritual order. This is not a fear of destruction alone, but of the corrosion of hope and freedom, the subtle undermining of life's light by shadow's persistent creep. In his reflection, Gandalf acknowledges that fear can be a teacher, a guardian that sharpens vigilance and humility. It reminds us that evil often wears many faces, and that the most insidious threats are not always the loudest or most obvious. This wisdom guides Gandalf's approach, not to conquer or dominate, but to nurture resilience and hope in others. His strength lies not just in power, but in empathy, patience, and the ability to inspire courage where it is most fragile. The Witch-King's curse and terror serve as a mirror, revealing the price of power divorced from compassion and the cost of enduring darkness. Gandalf's journey illustrates that resisting shadow requires balance, a harmony of strength and gentleness, certainty and humility. This chapter's themes echo through the story's motifs: the liminal nature of the Witch-King's curse, the fragility of political alliances, the power of prophecy and fate, and above all, the quiet but steadfast hope that resists despair. As we close, Gandalf's reflection leaves us with a calm but powerful truth. Fear need not paralyze, but can illuminate the path toward wisdom and courage, helping us face even the darkest shadows with measured resolve. This meditation brings us full circle, deepening the opening thesis and inviting us to carry forward its lessons beyond Middle-earth's tale.